Hey there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So it's been a few weeks now since we last talked about 28 Years Later, or the sequel movies that will be coming after. Unfortunately, the movie came and went. I had a great time. I went down to London. I personally met Danny Boyle, had a conversation with him, and it was a great time. But the movie came and went. We talked about all the news, and unfortunately it dried up a little bit. But now we have some brand new information regarding 28 Years Later, Part 2, The Bone Temple. It looks like they've been doing screenings, test screenings for audiences, and it looks like we have our first piece of information here. So we're going to dive in. There is a bit of reading for us to get to here, so I do apologize, but it's still really interesting nonetheless. So let's get into it. This comes to us from Joe Blow. So 28 Years Later Part 2, The Bone Temple gets positive buzz out of first test screenings. I will say, I will attach a note to this video as we go any further, guys. Sometimes when we get these reports when it comes to movie test screenings, sometimes the information can be a little bit untrustworthy. It's hard to say. Sometimes these can be accurate pieces of information, sometimes they're not. Take it with a grain of salt as always, but still, like I said at the beginning, I still find this fascinating regardless. So let's get into it, and let's start breaking down the details here. So guys, I have not read this myself. I have no idea what this test screening reaction is going to be for The Bone Temple, so I'm just as excited to get into this as you guys. So, 28 Days Later director Danny Boyle and screenwriter Alex Garland finally reunited to make the sequel to their zombie, or if you prefer, infected people. I like that the person who wrote this article knows that a lot of people get annoyed when they're called zombies. Okay, or Infected People movie classic 28 Years Later, which is meant to launch a whole trilogy of 28 Days Later sequels, reached theatres at the end of June, and the second chapter in the trilogy, 28 Years Later Part 2, The Bone Temple, is scheduled to be released January 16th, 2026. Literally 6 months after this film, which again blows my mind how quickly, in quick succession, we've got these two movies. But it's great. We don't have to wait 3 or 4 years, for the follow-up movie. So I'm all the more happy for it. The first test screening of the sequel was held last month, and World of Real reports that some very positive buzz has come out of that screening. Again, take it with a pinch of salt, guys. Like I always say, just letting you know. So, Garland, who wrote the screenplays for the sequels that will come after 28 Years Later, Boyle directed the first one, then passed the helm over to Candyman and the Marvel's director Nia DaCosta for the sequel. Yeah, I've already talked about this so much on the channel, but for those of you who may be new to this video, this really does concern me. I mean, the Candyman, the remake that Nia DaCosta did, I don't think it was received all that well. I don't hear a lot of people that were talking about it. There wasn't much buzz surrounding that movie. And then obviously The Marvels, one of the worst performing Marvel films. It just wasn't received well. That movie wasn't good whatsoever. So I have to admit, I'm very, very concerned with Nia DaCosta directing the sequel. It has me on edge, but until I see a first trailer, some posters, some marketing that may relieve some of that nerves that I have at the moment, I have to be honest and say I'm very, very nervous about Nia DaCosta directing this movie. Okay, Boyle might circle back to direct 28 Years Later Part 3. I really hope he does, because if it's going to have Cillian Murphy, an actor of Cillian Murphy's caliber, we need to have an A-class, world-talent director in there directing Cillian Murphy. And Danny Boyle is that director who can do that. I'd much prefer him than Nia DaCosta to do it, that's for sure. But that one doesn't have a full green light yet. Probably won't until we see the second film, how the second film does at the box office, 28 Years Later made 150 million at the global box office, but seemed to have trouble connecting with the audience. Yeah, I mean, 150 million was like the break-even point for the film, pretty much, because I had a $60 million budget. So 150 kind of broke even, or maybe just about made a bit of profit. I don't know the exact figures. I mean, the exact figures haven't been revealed. But when we think about the secondary ancillary market as well, we've got DVDs, we've got Blu-rays, we've got merchandising, all that kind of stuff that's going to be adding on to that 150 million. So when all's said and done, it should make a profit, just about, I hope at least, anyway. But seemed to have trouble connecting with audiences. Joe Blow's own Chris Bunbury gave 28 Years Later a 7 out of 10. I have no problem with that. I would personally give it a 7 or an 8 out of 10 myself. There are a few points where it could be improved. It's not a perfect film by any means. As much as I fanboy about it, there are improvements that could be made. And when we got a second opinion from Keir Gooms, he gave it a 6.5 out of 10. Again, I would have no problem with someone giving it a 6.5 or a 7. I think that's fair to give it around about that score, to be fair. Okay, so according to the World of Real, 28 years later, Part 2, The Bone Temple, could turn things around in a big way for this planned trilogy. So guys, this big block of red text here, this is where it gets really exciting. This is what we're here for, to discuss what happens with this audience test screening. So, audience reports indicate multiple applause breaks out during the film. One attendee who loved the first film, said, quote, "I thought part 1 was outstanding, but this surpassed it." Jack O'Connell, coming off of Sinners, which, guys, if you have not seen Sinners, man, that movie is all kinds of incredible. Jack O'Connell, one of the stars of that movie. Just go and see it if you haven't seen it. Just trust me. Is already being touted for Villain Performance of the Year. Villain Performance of the Year. For the second year in a row. The central dynamic is essentially a duel between O'Connell and Ralph Fiennes' Bone Shriner, Dr. Ian Kelson, who has a larger role than in the first installment and delivers a performance that's even better than the previous film. I mean, what can be said? I mean, Jack O'Connell coming off of Sinners, this guy is one of the hottest actors in Hollywood, and Ralph Fiennes, he absolutely brings it in everything that he's in. He's incredible. The first 28 years later movie, he was incredible. The small part of the movie he played, Dr. Ian Kelson, his performance was so emotional, so he feels like a real character, and he just brings the heat every time. So him having a bigger performance in the second film, I think is going to absolutely kill it. Okay, so the script impresses, particularly the third act, which reportedly excited a strongly positive reaction from attendees when the narrative took a bold turn. So one insider hinted that there's a sequence in the final act that will be talked about for much of 2026. Cinematically, the sequel takes a more traditional approach than its predecessor. Unlike the first film, there's no evidence that iPhones or handheld cameras dominated the production. Instead, Nia DaCosta embraces more classical filming style. Thanks to their deal with Sony, each of the films in the trilogy will be receiving a theatrical release and will have budgets in the 60 million range. So yeah, a lot of you guys were confused. I had a lot of questions on previous videos where people were saying, the $60 million budget is for both of these movies because they were shot back to back, the first movie and the second movie. $60 million was for each movie, not for both movies. That's where a lot of people were getting confused about the production budgets and how much money these movies needed to make a profit. So each movie is $60 million budget, not across both. So that's kind of cleared up here. Okay, so 28 years later had a budget of 75 million. It's been reported as 75 million, but it's actually 60 million, from most sources. Boyle and Garland produced 28 years later with Bernie Bello, original producer McDonald, and Pete Rice, who was head of Fox Searchlight Pictures when the company backed 28 days later. Cillian Murphy received an executive producer credit. Are you glad to hear that 28 years later, Part 2, The Bone Temple's first test screening went well? Absolutely, I am. Like, that sounds great, but again, I always take this with a pinch of salt. I know I've said it a few times already, but yeah, I mean, this sounds great. So let's just go back over the key points here quickly. So the central dynamic is essentially between Jack O'Connell and Ralph Fiennes, which having those two actors on screen together, the dynamic and the chemistry between them, and the different characters and what they represent and their backgrounds and how they're surviving the apocalypse and how they're approaching, survival and how they're going to be communicating with each other, I think it's going to be so fascinating to watch. Dr. Ian Kelson has a larger role than the first installment. It's even better than the previous film. The script impresses, particularly in the third act, which reportedly elicited a strong positive reaction. One insider hinted that the sequence in the final act will be talked about for much of 2026. So it sounds like something happens in the third act. It could be a twist, it could be a big action scene, it could be like really horror, but there's something that sounds like it's pretty going to be really, really crazy in that third act. And obviously they take a more traditional approach to this movie, making it, rather than using iPhones and that kind of weird 3D kind of panoramic rig that they used, it sounds like they're going with much more traditional filmmaking processes here, which I don't have a problem with. I mean, there's no problem with that whatsoever, as long as what you put on screen is obviously compelling. But there we go, guys. So, the first test screenings for 28 years later, The Bone Temple seems to be very, very positive, and it sounds, you know, like it's going to be even bigger, better, and more crazier than the first movie was, which is exactly what we want. Grab that dial and dial it up to 11. That's kind of what we want here. But Ralph Fiennes is going to be the guy holding this movie together by the sound of it, which I can't wait for. So guys, you see this information here about this test screening. Do you think do you think it sounds good? Do you think it sounds bad? And does it get you more excited for 28 years later, The Bone Temple? What do you think about this news? Whatever stands out to you, jump into the comment section, leave your thoughts, your comments, and your opinions. As always, guys, would love to hear what you have to say about this. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you hit the like button before you leave. Consider becoming a subscriber to help support the content here on the channel. And hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date with more 28 years later, The Bone Temple. As it becomes, more news comes online, we're going to be talking about this a lot, guys. As it gets closer to the approach towards the end of the year, there's going to be a lot more information of this movie coming out. So make sure you do hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date with everything we're talking about here in regards to this franchise. Also, don't forget, we're talking about movie news, gaming news, and streaming news on the channel as well. So make sure you stay up to date with that. And as always, guys, I will see you in the next channel. In the next video, not the next channel. I apologize. Anyway, guys, I'll see you later.